welcome to VantagePoint AI's live YouTube channel, where we are going to be covering the perfect storm for several areas of the market here lately. It's very fitting because we have a storm coming through my area right now, so if you hear some rumbling in the background, it's just the perfect storm coming through Florida, but hey, it is that time of year here, so we roll with it. Just like we should roll with some of the trades and the market trends that we've seen in the markets recently. There's been some pretty fantastic trends. I hope that you guys have either caught those ahead of time or hopefully you're watching your VantagePoint software. So I see we do have a few family members in here already, but I also know that there are some users that might not yet be using VantagePoint. So do me a favor, if you have never heard of VantagePoint or you're not yet using VantagePoint, go ahead and let me know in the chat, because I want to make sure we run through some basics with you as well to make sure that you can keep up with our VantagePoint family members here who may already know some of the basics in the software. I promise it'll be easy, but I do want to just make sure we make this an educational experience for everyone, even if you're not using the VantagePoint software. That's okay. We of course are providing education here during our training sessions, and so with that, I do want to remind everybody that this is purely educational. I'm not a licensed advisor, so I won't be going over any trading advice, but certainly will help you guys to better understand the current market trends and hopefully how to take advantage of those moving forward. So let's go ahead and dive right on into our VantagePoint software. I'm just going to go ahead and get that pulled on up for us over here. So let's go ahead and jump on in. All right, everybody. So you should be seeing my VantagePoint software now. Looks like everybody is up and going. So I am going to be... Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I was just taking a look at the chat. Looks like it needs some volume. Okay, give me just 1 second, guys. Let me know if that's a little bit better for you. I was seeing everything okay here on my end, but thanks for the feedback. That just helps us to get better each and every single time. So thank you. All right. Perfect. All right. Thank you. Okay, perfect. So we'll keep on going. So hopefully you guys could have heard me at least. I understand it was a little bit low, so fixing that issue. Looks like it's all resolved. Okay, so let's talk about some major market trends that we've had here in the market, sort of this perfect storm setup, and hopefully you've been able to ride some of those waves. So the first one that I want to talk about today is really an area of the market. I mean, most of you probably see that on my screen already, but it's Bitcoin. Cryptocurrencies specifically have been on just a massive trend. And so many areas of the market have really been trending with Bitcoin because there are so many relationships with Bitcoin and cryptocurrency specifically within various market sectors now as well. If we think back, to even just a couple of years, cryptocurrency was sort of in this world of its own. But no longer that is the case, because now we see many projects from a lot of major mainstream companies really merging and bridging the gap between cryptocurrencies and kind of real life application. And so with that adoption in the mainstream, cryptocurrencies have become, very, very popular and certainly worth talking about, because there's a lot of opportunity here in the markets when it comes to the cryptocurrencies. Now, we'll also go over some things with the ETFs and clean energies, because those have also been areas of the market that have really taken off, in part, in relation to Bitcoin. There's a lot of correlations in the market, and really that's where VantagePoint shines. So let's go ahead and get to it. I am just going to go ahead and grab my pen here so you guys can see all what I am referring to. So we're actually talking about Bitcoin right now. I've got Bitcoin pulled up on the chart currently. And so let's just start with the basics for those of you who may not know VantagePoint, like one of our VantagePoint family members. And I promise you, again, it's very, very easy. We're really looking for 4 main things when it comes to identifying a trend. And so when we're looking for a trend, in VantagePoint, we're looking for primarily our crossover here. Now, this crossover is not just a moving average crossover. This is actually a predictive moving average crossover. So it's pairing a predictive moving average, which means we're using artificial intelligence, which is amazing, by the way. We're using artificial intelligence and plugging that data into the predictions in the forecast. Now, this is not just evaluating Bitcoin, but also evaluating everything that's impacting Bitcoin. In fact, the top 31 markets that are impacting Bitcoin, and I might open that up a little bit later, but just to show you guys how powerful this is, when you get that blue line crossing over the black line, that's our predictive moving average, signaling the bullish expectation in this market. And then we're going to use a second point of confirmation to confirm and give confidence in that expectation. So we move on down to our neural index, and we can see that the neural index, which is actually a 2-day predictor of price, so now we have our trend identification as well as confirmation from that price expectation. Both of them signaling bullish. Great, we have a good confidence signal here. But if you want to get even more confirmation, just layer the indicators. Layer the information, layer your knowledge so you can make a really well-informed trade decision. So what I'm going to do here is actually just load up our additional indicators here, and I'm going to just load from default. This will be a quick way to get those on there, and you can see now that we have 3 additional indicators, which are our predictive differences, and this is going to help us understand the strength of the current trend. Now, you can see my crossover did change slightly, and this is a way for each trader to customize their individual trade strategy. Every trader is a little bit different, right? No one trader is going to look at a chart and say exactly the same thing. And that's good. We want you guys to be individual traders and do what works best for you. And that's why VantagePoint is very, very customizable as well. So if you wanted to switch to a shorter term expectation, maybe you're a quick short 1 to 3 day trades, 1 to 3 day trade, great. Use the shorter term crossover, that shorter term information for those quick wins, those quick ins and outs. If you're a little bit longer term swing trader, maybe you like to stay in a week or so, then simply switch over to the medium term crossover. It's really that simple. This is a longer term forecast. It actually looks out 2 days. And so here we can see this was the trend that we were on previously. So here's our medium term crossover, and we can see that our predictive differences, which measure the strength of the expected trend, are all pointing in the same direction, which would be up, right? So we would consider this a bullish reading when our predictive differences are going up, along with our neural index and our crossover here as well. So with the confirmation here layered on top of each other, it's very easy, very simple to make a quick trade decision, but not only a quick trade decision, one where you're not second guessing yourself, and one where you have a lot of confidence and you've made an informed decision for your future. All right, so with that being said, let's take a look at cryptocurrency trends here recently. Who trades cryptocurrencies here? And I'm keeping an eye on the chat as we go through, so thanks for your feedback about the audio, guys. Much appreciated. Absolutely. All right, so as we see our crossover here and our potential entry point, if you were trading bullishly or wanting to possibly enter into a trade here, and again, not giving you trade advice, just from a purely educational standpoint, we can see green, green, and up would indicate primarily bullish expectation here. So if you wanted to take a long position here, that would be up to you, but all signals kind of pointing towards that go sign. That blue line remains above that black line the entire time here, all the way until 528. So 528 is where we really get this shift in direction, and if we even want a further confirmation here, we could call that 529. So on May 29th, VantagePoint had signaled that there was some potential bearish expectation here. You can see how the blue line crosses below the black line and the trend turns red. It doesn't get much simpler than that. But let's go ahead and add on those pieces of confirmation that we were talking about earlier and look down to see, do we have confirmation from that neural index, that price expectancy? So trend and price and strength gives you a very strong trade decision here. All right. So knowing with very, very high accuracy, in fact, up to 87.4% accuracy in VantagePoint, that these indicators, these predictive indicators, are guiding you through this trend. You don't have to get emotional in between. You don't have to worry if you've made the right decision. You've got confidence here, and confidence from not one, but 3 indicators, all confirming your decision. All right, so sometimes we just need confirmation, right? That affirmation that you're making the right choice, that you are doing the right thing. Now, you're going to want to do the right thing for you, of course, and that's why we have those various predictive moving averages. All right, so let's see if we can take a look at our current trend here, and our current trend is bullish. Now, how do we know that? Right? That's always the question. How do you know? Well, you guys take a look. You tell me. When did we have our bullish crossover? On 6-7 here, right? Let's go through and confirm. We have confirmation here from that green neural index, and then we have our predictive differences all trending up as well. So again, confirmation. All right, now how do we manage this trend moving forward? Well, that's going to be a key piece to any trade strategy, is your position management. I like to think of things in phases, right? It's just easier that way, kind of little baby steps to the trade. So what is your entry and what are your entry signals? How do you manage that position? And then what are your exit signals? What are those sort of red flags that tell you as the trader, ooh, okay, I think this has run its course. Maybe you're getting out to take profits. Maybe you're protecting yourself. There's lots of different ways to manage the trade and manage your exit as well. So make sure that when it comes to trading and kind of just life in general, that you know what you stand for. Knowing what you stand for is going to limit what you fall for, especially when it comes to opportunities. All right. So as we see, we have our bullish expectation here with Bitcoin. All right, so we've sort of resumed our trend from Bitcoin in this bullish expectation. That gives us sort of this, hopeful expectation for Bitcoin here as we continue to trend in a bullish direction. So, did we see some shorter term weakness? Absolutely, right? That's going to happen in the markets. We may experience some of that shorter term weakness, but that doesn't have to mean that you have to ride that down, right? Maybe you exited out when you saw the crossover. Again, this is going to be up to the individual trader, but how do you take advantage of something like this in the markets? And that's really where ETFs also come into play. Because, with the emergence of a lot of new ETFs, especially in the crypto sector, you can really leverage some of these markets. Who knew that there were inverse ETFs, or who knows what an inverse ETF is? Let me ask it that way. Who knows what an inverse ETF is? Oh, Vincent, perfect. Great question for Forex trading. And we can take a look at some Forex markets as well. Just like cryptocurrencies, they're traded oftentimes, the major pairs at least, right, are traded against the US dollar. So VantagePoint forecast for the Forex markets as well. All right, so looks like most of you are not really familiar with inverse ETFs, and it seems like some of you are, but that's okay. We'll go over them anyways, because even in cryptocurrencies, with the emergence of a lot of new ETFs in those various sectors, we've seen where you can actually leverage and take advantage of the downside, even if you don't feel comfortable shorting the market. And that's the important part, is if you don't short the market, or maybe you don't want to sell out of your Bitcoin, that's your trade strategy, whatever your prerogative is. We want you to stick with that. But we also at VantagePoint are here to really highlight the just plethora of opportunities here in the market. So with that, let's take a look at VITI. This is an inverse ETF specifically for Bitcoin. So we can see here that this is the ProShares short, which means it would be inverse Bitcoin ETF. And so I'm going to jump back over to Bitcoin here for 1 second because I want you guys to remember some dates for me, okay? So either, get your pen and paper out or get ready here. But let's take a look at this 529. Now, if you wanted an earlier signal, remember, I told you you could use a shorter term crossover for an earlier signal. So I'll shift that over here, and we can see that that crossover for the shorter term or the earlier signal is going to give us 528. So we could either look at 528 or 529, regardless, the trend is identified here. And we can see that very quickly. So remember that date. And then also let's take a look at 6-7, okay? Because that's really the end of this bearish move here in Bitcoin. All right, so I'm going to jump on over to VITI. Again, this is our inverse, means it's going to move opposite. Whatever Bitcoin typically does, you're typically going to see VITI do the exact opposite. And so during that time frame that we talked about, what did we talk about? 528, 529, right? Right around here, we see a crossover. And again, walk through those points of confirmation with me, if you will. And we can see that we do have our bullish trend expectation. Check to that, right? What is price telling us? Well, we have a bullish price expectation. So trend, bullish, price action, bullish expectation. And then also the 3 predictive differences are also signaling strength coming into that trend. There we go. There we have it. Our points of confirmation here giving us a bullish trend on 528 to a market that does the opposite of what Bitcoin does. So when things pull back in Bitcoin and you're not quite sure, well, here's other opportunities, other ways to look at the market. Take a fresh perspective and look for some new opportunities. There's plenty of them out there. And so using our forecast model here, we can see that we are just continuing on up until we get some real strong weakness here. And then we can see our predictive differences coming down. Our neural index is now red. Now, yes, we wait for the crossover here, but if you were already at a profit, again, this is where you talk about profit protection and setting stops. If you're managing that position accordingly, you could have had a very nice profit here. So again, we will take a look at that, and that's on 6-6, right? Look at what our predictive differences are doing here as well. Not only do we have that blue predictive moving average coming down, we've got a red neural index, and then we've got 2 out of the 3 predictive differences moving down, and then 1 of them going sideways. So not a whole lot of strength pulling back into that trend. Now, of course, you can use that to confirm on Bitcoin as well. All right, so that really covers kind of the cryptocurrencies here. Does anybody have a cryptocurrency that they wanted to pull up today? All right, I'm gonna go ahead and I will save some of those towards the end because I do wanna make sure we have enough time to get through some of the other major market movements in the market. But go ahead and you can type some of those ticker symbols in now, and I will not forget about them. I'm watching the chat, so we'll cover those towards the end of the session here today. But I do want to go through some live analysis with you guys. So if there's any ticker symbols you all want to see, please go ahead and enter those in. And also too, don't forget, I'm live here, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you guys have about the technical analysis, the predictive indicators here, or again, do some live analysis right here with you. After all, that's why we do these, and that's the fun part. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of these other ETFs, specifically areas of the market that really have just been moving significantly lately. Things like the artificial intelligence sector, again, clean energy as well, but not only just the individual stocks, but also the ETFs. So if you notice, I'm just going to open this up. VantagePoint, we have many ETFs here, and we've recently actually added to our ETF repertoire. So, with all of the, advantages that ETFs provide, we really, found that we needed to be innovative, right? That's exactly who we are as a company. And so with the new ETFs that are influxing into the market, we wanted to make sure that those were available to our traders as well. So if you notice, we have quite a few different ETF sectors here. And again, one of those being cryptocurrencies. So even if you don't trade crypto specifically, you do have the potential to trade crypto, but more from an equity standpoint, because those ETFs are going to be traded just like equities, but they are going to follow the cryptocurrencies as well. So there are quite a few. One we've looked at, is an inverse ETF, but there are others that do follow that exact correlation as well. So let's take a look at some of the other markets here that we've seen just on the rise and taking off here recently. And that's again in technology, AI, clean energies. There's been lots of great trends in the market recently. So, if you found yourself, missing out on some of those trends, then, no time like the present to make sure that you're prepared for some big moves coming up. And so let's take a look at some of the current moves and where their expectation lies. And so here we can see on technology ETF here, we have our crossover. We can see now this is a different crossover. This is the triple cross. So the triple cross here provides a lot of information here on one view. It provides an actually really a very clear at a glance look as to what the trend expectation is, but also the strength of the trend as well. And so if we see, we have the bullish crossover here on the triple cross, and that is when that area turns green. All right, so when that area turns green, what does that mean, guys? All right, so I'm hoping everybody's going to type in bullish here, right? There we go. Got a few bullish responses. Very good. All right, so what does it mean when it's yellow, right? I kind of like to think of this as a stoplight. It's very, very simple. As humans, we try to overcomplicate things, which is why AI is so beautiful, because it does all the complex analysis and we don't have to get tripped up on our own thoughts. So with the artificial intelligence here in VantagePoint, we can actually track the AI ETF. And as you see, we have bearishness when that's red. Yellow is sort of a hang on, caution, kind of like a stoplight, right? You just slow. And then green is go. We're hitting on the accelerator. All right, simple as that. So let's take a look at some of our crossovers as well, even if you wanted to use maybe a longer term. Maybe you are a longer term trader. So if you are looking to hold positions slightly longer, you could even use something like the long-term crossover. This is a 3-day trend expectation. It's actually looking out 3 days into the future, has 3 days of predictive data from the neural networks and the artificial intelligence to forecast that 3 days out. So with that expectation, we have a little bit more conservative view of the trend expectation. But still using those same concepts from before, we're just confirming the indicators are moving in the right direction and they're all in agreement. When things are in agreement, everybody's happy, right? So let's take a look at our trend. We've got our bullish crossover here, we've got our neural index here, bullish, and we've got our predictive differences going up. Fantastic, right? Easy enough. As long as this trend remains green, blue line over black, we're still in a bullish expectation. So where are we now? Well, we can see some bullish expectation, but we do have a little bit of weakness coming up here as well. That's really not to be unexpected. All right, we can see that happening in the software ahead of time. So you don't have to worry about what the next day is expected to bring, okay? So we are going to switch on over then to our triple cross. So now we've walked through all 4 of our predictive moving averages here in the software. So we have a short term with the short term crossover. Remember, that's a 1 day. The medium term looks out 2 days, and then the long term looks out 3 days, with the triple cross being our most conservative, great for position management, seeing the strength of the trend at a glance. How many of you traders want to just be able to look at a chart and just see what's happening immediately? All right, and that's where the triple cross comes in. It just provides a really nice bird's eye view of the trend and the current strength of the trend. If it's green, it's a strong bullish trend. If you see some yellow, you should be a little bit cautious, right? And so where are we right here? We are still at a bullish expectation from our triple cross. And so with that, yes, there are going to be some shorter term bits of weakness in the market. If you're a longer term trader and you want to stay in through those, great. This gives you the confidence to do so. Also, I'm going to note, just take a look at this T-cross long level as well. And I say the T-cross long because I'm so used to, our VantagePoint family members knowing what the T-cross long level is. But just for those of you who maybe don't have VantagePoint yet, and if you want more information on VantagePoint, don't forget to go to VantagePointForecast.com. I'm sure we'll drop it in the chat as well. And so that will give you some more information on how VantagePoint is using artificial intelligence and neural networks to forecast the markets with such incredible accuracy. So let's get back to this T-cross long. And what this is actually a predictive exponential moving average. So this is, technical jargon for a dynamic level of support and resistance. Who is familiar with levels of support and resistance? I bet most of you know what support and resistance is, and if you don't, well, great, you're about to find out, right? So education away. All right, so here we go with our T-cross long. Everybody follow this darker blue line here for me. All right, this darker blue line that runs along the bottom of this bullish trend. So we can see that darker blue line. All right, everybody following me here? Perfect, looks like everyone's with me. So as we start to see our trend shift from consolidation to bullishness, right? Now we have even more confidence here. Even if you entered into that a little earlier on one of the other crossovers, those shorter term crossovers, how much more confidence do you have when you now see more conservative indicators starting to shift in your favor, right? Typically that means the trend is moving in your favor as well. So maybe here your position management strategy is to add to a position, right? Or maybe you are taking profits if you are a quick short-term moves. That's completely up to you. But if you want to stay in this trend for longer expectations, then the triple cross has got your back right here, providing the data that you need to have a lot of confidence in staying in that position. And so here now, that T-cross long level, again, that darker blue line, we can oftentimes see that price reverts back down to that T-cross long. And so when that darker blue line, that T-cross long level, is hit by price, but we fail to break through it, meaning we come down, we try to touch it, try to break it, can't, and we bounce back off of it, that tells us that that is a very strong level of support. And support provides that push that price might need to really bounce off of. Think of support like a trampoline, right? Sometimes you're going to jump higher than others, right? And sometimes you've got a couple of friends on the trampoline and it's going to bounce right off. But either way, look at that darker line as a level of support that helps to bolster or helps support price up. All right, so it's supporting the bullish trend that we see through our forecast here. So let me remove my drawings here and let's work through this trend together so you guys can see that as we progress through our trend, this line changes because it is a predictive moving average, and each time we come and try to test that T-cross long, it acts as that support level. And so yes, we will see some potential weakness, especially when the markets are a little chaotic. We do have some fundamentals that are causing a little bit of hesitancy, or I don't want to say fear, right? Because I don't think that the markets are fearful at this point, but we do have a little bit of drawdown, right? And that's to be expected in the markets. There's always going to be risk, but how do we know when that risk becomes too high? All right, and that's where you as the trader need to know where you stand, where your strategy says, should you get out, should you stay, right? It's that old, should I stay or should I go, right? I won't sing for you because, we'll stick to the technical analysis. But as we can see, we are going to continue on our bullish expectation currently. Now, we have seen 3 different indicators so far. Let's take some time to actually cover another really important predictive indicator here, and that's the next day predictive trade range. So this next day predictive trade range, really, really important when it comes to next day analysis, even setting stops, potential profit targets, or even identifying the best point of entry. Yes, all of that from one indicator. Really, really powerful. Who doesn't want to know where the next day predicted high and low is expected to fall, right? Certainly information that every trader could use to make their strategy better. All right, and just those small improvements that make a huge difference. So as we take a look at our predictive trade range, I am going to zoom in just a little bit because this is just a really, really cool indicator. And as we can see, VantagePoint's color coded. Thank our R&D team for that. Yay, R&D. We spend, VantagePoint spends a lot of money in R&D to make sure that we're giving you the best of the best information. So as you can see, the bottom of this trade candle is actually going to forecast the predicted low. The top of this trade candle is actually going to forecast the predicted high for the next day. So in between is the range. So we have a range between the predicted high and the predicted low. Now we were expecting some potential weakness in this market today. How did we know that? Well, it's VantagePoint, it's the neural networks, it's artificial intelligence. It knows more than us as humans because it can calculate things behind the scenes in a mass way that we would just never be able to do as humans. And so when you think about how to navigate through a trend where we do have this bullish expectation here, right? But we also are seeing some potential shorter term weakness. Now, if you see this ahead of time, you're less likely to be scared by a little bit of market volatility, right? And that's the real power here, is being proactive, being ready. Be ready for some of these circumstances to occur so you know how to pivot in your strategy to make a better trade decision, all right? If you're ready, you're not scared, right? You're prepared for the scenarios that could possibly pop up because they're no longer coming from around a blind corner and blindsiding you. Now you can see them a day ahead of time using the software, using the predictive analysis in VantagePoint. And again, for those users or for those attendees who might not have VantagePoint yet, the software updates every night at 6:30. Okay, so you have this information the day before. This information we're seeing now, actually, I got last night at 6:30. So the bit of weakness that we've seen, no big deal, right? No big deal when you can plan around it. So know when to shift your strategy. Again, know what you stand for, limits what you fall for when it comes to your trades. So let's take a look at some other ETFs here, some other power movers that we've seen here recently. XSW, man, tech, software, artificial intelligence. And again, this really incorporates everything from cryptocurrencies to fintech to clean energy. The advancements in technology and innovation in, the past few years has just been explosive. And so have some of these trends. And so to use that innovation in a way that helps you to take advantage of some of these explosive trends is exactly where the power in VantagePoint really shines brightest. And so taking a look at another very explosive trend, we can see that we did have our crossover come right back here. In fact, I'll switch over to some of those shorter term views here. So let's switch to that short term view so we can identify the real start of this kind of strong bullish trend, right? And again, looking at those crossovers, the predictive neural index, and then the predictive differences down here at the bottom, we can see, boom, that explosive trend riding on up. We can see that happen. Now, once you get that crossover to the downside, which actually happens right here, all right, and we can see that we do see a little bit of weakness here in the markets and then pulling back up. Again, if you wanted to look at that from a little bit more conservative perspective, again, we do see that bullishness here and then switching on over here, keeping us out of that consolidation. So this is where VantagePoint can also help you avoid some of those bad or marginal trades as well, because we don't have a bullish crossover yet. And if you notice at this point where we have our bearish crossover, notice we don't have full confirmation here, we actually see that the predictive differences are not all in agreement. So that would not be equating to a bearish trend. That would be some consolidation when we don't have full agreement. What happens when things are arguing? We typically don't move very far, right? So that conversation doesn't usually progress very far. And so same with the trend. We don't have indicators in alignment, in agreement. We definitely want to be careful there. All right, so I'm gonna jump on over to Tesla and jump right on over to clean energies. I feel like Tesla is one that kind of covers the gamut when it comes to technology, clean energy, and it's always a hot one that everybody wants to look at. So if we take a look at our chart here for Tesla, then you can see that we do have a bullish crossover here back on 424. Now, most of you have seen the Tesla chart. We've looked at it, on just about every live stream we've done because it's always requested. So I thought I'd just pull it up for us anyways. I got smart and just said, you know what? I know someone's going to request it. So let's just open it up right now. So with Tesla, we can see crossover here on 424 with our confirmation of the bullish predictive differences. And then, of course, crossover to the downside on 6-4 with the bearish predictive differences signaling some weakness here within that bullish trend or strength to the downside, however you want to look at that. If you trade options, you might look at that as another opportunity. And that's the beautiful thing about the markets, is there's really no such thing as a bad market. There's an up market, there's a down market, and as long as you know how to trade in either one, then you can make money in either scenario. Of course, there's always the sideways market too, which for you options traders who like spreads, well, fantastic. The world is your oyster, right? So knowing where to look for some of these trends is key. And so, yes, we've covered some of these, hotter sectors here recently, with the crypto markets, even the ETFs, clean energies. And as we jump into some other trends here, we can see massive movements in some of these sectors. Well, how do we identify what sectors are moving and what sectors are not? Thank you, Vincent. Perfect. Okay. So I just saw some other ticker symbols come in. So thank you very much. We'll go ahead and talk about those here in just another few minutes coming up. Who caught that move on Tesla? Did anybody? VantagePoint users or those who are not, could you have improved slightly using those VantagePoint indicators? And I speak with many traders on a daily basis, and I can tell you that that VantagePoint did forecast that move a lot sooner than most would have expected, even to the downside. If you switch that over to the short term, right? If you are looking for an opportunity to short the market, then you would just invert everything that we've talked about bullishly and flip that to bearish, looking for that confirmation. So on 530 here, we had a bearish crossover. We had a bearish neural index, and we have the predictive differences trending down as well. So with that, we have our confirmation, right? We would have also have checked, our predictive trading range as well to make sure that was confirming bearish. But looking at those indicators, we can see the opportunity to potentially short some of these markets as well. Now, if you don't short the markets, great. Find an inverse ETF so you don't have to miss out on the opportunity either. There are, again, plenty of opportunities as long as you know where to look. So if I jump back over to plug here, all right, just checking the chat here. Sorry, I missed a couple of them, but perfect. All right, so as we can see, great opportunities in assets that vary. I mean, plug is gone down, significantly from where it was previously. But, could it be back on the rise? And if we take a look just at our most conservative indication, we can see that we've really had a shift and a huge rally here in plug, one of those breakout trends, right? And so looking at our various indicators, in fact, let's walk through this backward from most conservative to more shorter term, and we'll do this in order. So here is our our triple cross view, the most conservative. Switching on over to that 3-day outlook, again, we can see that bullish trend expectation, walking over to our medium term trend expectation, and then over to that shorter term move. And we can see that where we get our crossover here confirm with our neural index. And in fact, you know what, let me just load our predictive differences on here as well. I have those set as the default now, so that way we can actually see where that crossed, taking that massive move here to the upside. Again, looking at that shorter term expectation here, but again, more conservative. We see the crossover from the triple cross as well. So areas of clean energy really making big moves here recently. We can even see Tesla kind of trying to, you know, rally back up here, and even things like Ballard Power Systems. So if you're wondering how to find these types of opportunities, great, that's where, you know, VantagePoint can help you too. So who is using, if you are a VantagePoint family member, who's using IntelliScan? If you are not, you probably want to know what IntelliScan is, and we're going to cover that. So if you're wondering how to identify some of these shorter term moves or even longer term moves, or even again, what areas to look at in the market, that's where we can use our IntelliScan. If you want to find something where, you know, we had that really, really strong move in Bitcoin, and then we'll just go straight into our IntelliScan. So again, this is how we find these opportunities in the markets. And you can scan ETFs, you can scan stocks, Forex pairs, you can also scan any market that VantagePoint forecasts for. And so if I just create a new scan, because everybody wants to know, is there a scanner for that, right? And lucky for you, the answer is yes. Yes, there is a scan. And in fact, the scan can really be customized to the individual trader. And that is such a powerful piece of VantagePoint, is that each trader is different, but the software, it can adapt to that based on your needs as a trader. And so if we take our IntelliScan, and you know what, let's just identify very quickly what areas of the market are moving very strongly right now, right? How do we do that? And the best way to do that really, and again, there's no one size fits all, but the easiest way, I think, is just to take your spider sector and actually just drag and drop that into your scan. Because what this is going to do is it's actually going to formulate a grid so we can see what areas of the market are moving up very strongly, right? The energy sector, anybody think some of the clean energy might be in that sector, right? And we can see then what's up across the board. This is a very quick way at a glance to see what areas of the market are moving, which areas are slowing down, and most importantly, where should you shift your efforts? Because if you want to better identify stronger trends, then better to flow with the market than try to paddle against it, right? We all know what happens when you try to paddle against the current. You can get somewhere, but it's going to be a lot more work for a lot less gain. So leverage the power here with the predictive software to identify areas of the market that are trending in your favor, right? Always look for things that are in your favor. I mean, that's partially why Bitcoin has really taken off, is because conditions have been much more favorable for things like cryptocurrencies lately. And so, you know, towards the end of 2024, we really saw a larger rally happening, and things have shifted greatly for the cryptocurrencies with those changes. You know, everything from mainstream adoption to, you know, legislation that's changed as well. So what areas of the market should you focus on? And so this is where we can start to identify, again, those areas of the market that are moving very quickly. Now, you could also take this a step further, because we can always do a step further in VantagePoint, right? And we could actually look up what we would call themes here in VantagePoint. And the theme would be the theme of that market. So if we label the themes here, now you can pull this up in your stock sector, and we'll add stocks to this here in just a second, because I do want to point this out. The themes are going to be for your individual stocks. And so, of course, here we can add we can use our ETFs. I'm just going to save this as the default so I don't have to re-add themes in here. Or better yet, you know what? Let's just remove those markets. I'm just going to remove all of those markets since we already identified the areas of the markets that are moving. Then we can actually just drag and drop our US stock sectors right in here as well. That's the funnest part. It's just that drag and drop, right? Everybody likes an actionable step. Well, take action and move your stock sectors over into the IntelliScan. You can let the scan load and do its work. And then you'll notice that there are various themes that we're going to see here in the market, whether it be S&P, oil and gas, energies, whether it's on the NASDAQ. And so you can really search for different assets in a variety of different ways, and, you know, just about anything, you know, can be done in IntelliScan, right? So as we take a look, you could also search for those areas that are going up. Just put an up, right? Just use the drop down. It's as simple as this, and we can actually filter down. Now take a look. We're looking at almost 1,800 different stocks here and identifying those areas of the market. Now you could also filter on theme as well if you wanted oil or clean energy. So we can actually use these drop downs to further filter things down to find opportunities that are going to be ideal for you as the trader. So if you're a VantagePoint user, are you using themes? Do you find areas of the market that are trending before you're entering into a position? That's for just market analysis, market assessment. Whether you're a VantagePoint user or not, do you first look at where the markets are and get a good market assessment? Then from there, are you looking at the individual sectors that are moving and have money flowing into them? If you're not, then you might be missing a key step to a strategy. Now, again, your prerogative is your prerogative, but I certainly want to make sure that everybody understands that those key pieces are a fundamental piece of the puzzle, really, to identifying larger, stronger trends in the market. So as we move through, let's go ahead and pull up a couple of ticker symbols that I saw earlier. Now, give me a moment. I'm going to just go back through our chat here. There was Wrap Technologies. Let's see. There were a couple of others here too. And so, oh gosh, look at that. Anybody want to say there's potential for a breakout there? All right, sorry, I got sidetracked by looking at the chart. I often do that. They're just so fascinating when you really start, you know, diving into how these indicators work and just truly how powerful they are. So we had Wrap Technologies. Oh, we already had BLDP up. Okay, maybe that was the question earlier. Perfect. So let's go ahead and take a look at Wrap Technologies. So if we see, we were sort of in this area of consolidation here, right? And so I'm going to just minimize our scan here because this was a specific opportunity that somebody had asked to take a look at. So as we see this area of consolidation, I'm going to add just a few indicators. Now, of course, there's always more, right? But if we look at things like resistance, right? Let's add on this verified resistance zone, and let's also add on that support that we were talking about earlier. Now, of course, you could use your T-cross long, but in areas of consolidation, it's very easy to see where we've entered into sort of this channel per se, where price just is unable to break out of this lane that it's been in. And this is consolidation, right? So if we see that area of consolidation, notice these strong support levels. Now these are previous levels. These dotted lines here, these are going to be support and resistance levels. All right, so as we see those support and resistance levels, we can see that really price has been unable to break out. And I'll just draw kind of our most prominent support and resistance levels. Anyone see that channel there, right? Well, when you're stuck in a channel like that, that could be good for, you know, some delta neutral opportunities, you know, for you options traders. But if you're looking for breakout trends where you might be searching for some expected increased volatility, as well. Maybe that volatility is in your favor to the upside, or maybe if you short the market, it's to the downside, right? So our first sign of a potential breakout would be two consecutive closes. Let me just clear some of this off so you guys can see a little bit better. But two consecutive closes above a resistance level. And here we can see we actually do have two consecutive closes above that resistance level. We weren't able to do that previously. We just bounced off of that resistance. You can see we couldn't close above. We just kept banging our head on resistance. Whereas support, I mentioned earlier, acts more of a trampoline or a floor, and resistance is going to act as a ceiling. Okay, so here we can see we bounced off of support like a trampoline. Did we hit our head on the ceiling, or were we able to break through? And here we can see with those two consecutive closes, those 2 days back to back, where we closed above that resistance level. And I'll even zoom in for you guys so you can see it a little closer here. Zoom. There we go. We have 2 consecutive closes above the resistance, even though those were down days, right? It tells us a lot about the trend if we can close above that resistance. It means that we've broken above it and we could potentially see a breakout trend. Once we've got enough momentum to shift us in that direction, could we potentially see that continued breakout here? And you could even add on, some additional momentum indicators to look at that as well. So we'll keep it simple for today, right? Because I know we're kind of approaching the end of our time together, and time flies when you're having fun, that's for sure. But looking at our potential here, we can see crossover with 3 predictive differences, all trending up, right? And then of course that confirmed breakout using additional indicators like the support and resistance level. I'm going to zoom back out just a little bit so you guys can see again that channel between the support and resistance. And through here we can see our predictive differences, or our trend strength. We're fairly flat through most of this, not really in much agreement one way or the other. So we'd want to be very careful at that point. That's the beauty of layered confirmation, is that you're never relying on just one piece of information. Trust but verify, right? Trust your indicators, but verify with another predictive indicator to make sure that they are in agreement. Right, so okay, so I got some other ticker symbols here. Don't worry guys, we're not quite done just yet. All right, there we go. Let's see, APLD, you got it, Applied Digital. I appreciate the ticker symbols because I can tell you probably know ticker symbols better than I know company names at this point. But let's take a look at this Applied Digital trend. All right, so starting really way back here in 424, we can see that's really when we started to see the market rally. But with that too, understanding that the markets were starting to trend up at this point also gave us a lot more confidence in some of these individual trends as well. So that just goes to show the importance of looking at the major markets. And you can do that with your ETFs, looking at things like the SPY, the NASDAQ. The SPY is going to be the ETF that follows the S&P. The NASDAQ's ETF is the QQQ. The Diamonds or the DIA is the ETF that follows the Dow. So you can use, again, ETFs to do this market assessment as well. The power in ETFs really is just unlimited, and there's so much potential there. And as we see, 424, we have a crossover, bullish expectation, and our neural index is bullish as well. And then as we see our trend progressing up, right? Blue line over black line here. Now we do have a little bit of weakness here, but if you chose to get out here, you still had a nice run to the upside. If you stayed in because at that point you were at a profit, maybe you switched into position management mode, maybe you switched over to that medium term crossover. We can still see we had that bullish crossover with bullish expectation here on the neural index and predictive differences. So get that confirmation. Confirmation will give you confidence, and that confirmation will give you confidence to stay in as well. So as we can see that trend riding on up. Now, we mentioned the triple cross earlier, and just to bring things completely full circle for you here, we use that T-cross long, that darker blue line, as a dynamic level of support or resistance. You can see that even during that little downtrend that we saw, right? That short-term crossover did cross, but did it fall far enough for you to exit or execute your exit strategy? Again, completely up to you, but in a longer trend in position management, you do expect some variance in price. Price is not always going to go straight up in a direct line. Wouldn't it be nice if the markets did that? But we can all wish and hope and pray for that, but I don't think it'll happen anytime soon. The markets like to move, and hey, movement is how everybody makes money in the markets. And so as we see that little drawdown, navigate through that more effectively, more efficiently, more confidently with VantagePoint. And here we have the indicators that really give you the provisions to find all sorts of trends that are going to meet any type of trade style here as well. Now again, do we have some shorter term weakness? Certainly do, right? We do already have a shorter term crossover here. So if you were thinking about taking profits off of that shorter term trend, fantastic. Hopefully you did that, right? Because we had that signal days ago. All right. If you are expecting this to continue in its bullish trend, well, then hopefully you know that we're at an area of caution at this point. So what does your position management strategy say about higher risk scenarios? So here I'd like to say we're kind of cautiously hopeful about this bullish trend, but again, keyword there being cautious, because whenever we see some red flags start to happen in a trend, you do want to be prepared. Be ready, right? So let's just make sure I didn't miss anything. I think we're just about out of time. And again, reminder, if anybody needs additional information here about VantagePoint, just go to that VantagePointForecast.com. I know we dropped it in the chat a couple of times, but so glad to have you all with us today. So as we saw, there are just some amazing trends out there in the market. There's no reason to be fearful of the trends or fearful of a little bit of pullback or movement in the market. Again, movement is where everybody makes money in the market. So help yourself to navigate through those trends confidently using VantagePoint, whether it be in crypto or clean energy or AI or ETFs. If you've never taken a look at some of the ETFs that are out there right now, now is the time. There are new ETFs coming up, and VantagePoint is forecasting for those. So we've just added a huge repertoire of ETFs to the VantagePoint forecast. So that way our traders have exactly what they need when they need it. In fact, they have it ahead of time. So I hope everyone has a fantastic rest of their day today and good Friday ahead. And we'll see you guys on the next live. Have a good one.